Welcome to Struck by Science, a podcast of the Polish Academy of Sciences Center in Vienna.
Hello everyone, my name is Monika Gromala and I'm working at the Vienna Scientific Center of the Polish Academy of Science. And I invite you to join our podcast, Struck by Science, where we have pleasure to hosting permanent Polish researchers. And today our guest is Professor Adam Lipszyc, the philosopher, the essayist, the translator. Professor Lipszyc is a head of the Center of the Psychoanalytic Thought, yes, at the Institute of the Polish Academy of Science. He teaches in Collegium Civitas and at Graduate School for Social Research. And in his research, he investigates philosophical consequences of psychoanalysis and philosophy connected to the literature and a 20th century Jewish thought, as I remember. And Adam Lipszyc is an author of excellent academic books and essays. He has explored a lot of Walter Benjamin thoughts, works of Paul Celan, works of Franz Kafka, and many others Austrian authors. And today we'll talk about something we can call linguistic community from the perspective of the 20th century Austrian literature. And my first question is, tell me, Adam, in your opinion, it is possible to speak about an Austrian community of language or linguistic community, or we rather should use the term of German language community?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for this invitation and kind introduction. Very generous one. I would just make small correction. I used to teach in Collegium Civitas. Now I teach in a different institution called SWPS, which both institutions I'm very happy to have had or to have links to. I also teach at University, Muri University, Franz Kafka Muri University, which is an imagined institution, an imagined community of scholars that Monika also belongs to, which is not necessarily unrelated to our to the topic of our discussion, because we are, as I understand, going to talk about peculiar, non-obvious types of intellectual and spiritual communities, and Franz Kafka University of Muri is one of these. Now, to your question, obviously these are complex matters. I have to stress that I'm not an expert in Austrian literature. I'm a lover of Austrian literature. I'm in love in this very odd body of work. I'm a very, very fond reader of Austrian literature, but the more, I would say, better instructed specialist in this field. But let me talk about the eros, my love for the community. But by responding to your question, well, there are two questions here, obviously, or at least two. One is, if we think of Austrian cultural, as I understand, Austrian cultural circle as distinguished from a German one. Well, this for historical, cultural reasons, beginning. We're concentrating on the contemporary, more contemporary matters, beginning with the end of the collapse of the Habsburg Empire, which is the actual beginning of what we know today as Austrian literature. Austrian literature has been an Austro-cultural circle has been uh, distinct in so many ways, different from what happened in other German-speaking cultural centers, circles, that it makes perfect sense to look at it as a separate, very complex, but very special cultural milieu. Within this cultural milieu, struck by and defined by various catastrophes, beginning with the one that I already mentioned, the defining catastrophe of the collapse of the Habsburg Empire, then the catastrophe of Anschluss, then the catastrophe of the war in general, and the Shoah, with Austrian involvement in the process, in the massacres and slaughter, the prolonged presence of the occupying forces after the war, the much belated discussion of the public discussion over the national guilt, mm, which started, as we know, quite belatedly. Uh, in passing, it's not. It's also it's to be remembered that the events in the around 68 were very um, special and violent in many ways in Vienna, in Austria. So anyway, we have a very distinct cultural milieu here. And within this very distinct cultural milieu, we have a very distinct literary element, literary tradition. Mm, I am extremely interested in this tradition. I think it is special when confronted with other European literatures, literary traditions, and distinct, as far as I can tell, distinct also in comparison with other German-speaking literatures written in German, especially the one produced in Germany as it is. It is just to give a glimpse or a touch of how distinct it is. It is always much more radical than anything else. It is vicious, radical, ironic, sarcastic, going to the very roots of the matter. It rarely leaves a stone unturned. It rarely cherishes um, positive statements, affirmative statements in any unmediated way. If there is anything hopeful, utopian, positive in Austrian literature, and I think there is some of it, it is very rarely given in a unmediated way. You have to look for it. It's always troubled by question marks, by hesitation. It is, in other words, it's for me, one of the most critical bodies of literary work that have been produced in 20 and 21st century. In this sense, it's the one of the most valuable elements of European heritage. It's not only a German speaking or Austrian thing, but it's a piece of for me, it's a piece of European heritage that contributes to our reflection upon what we are as European community, what we are as people in general, but what we are after, what we want to have in Europe, what we want to be, and it keeps on questioning us, and hence its value is, I would say, cannot be really overestimated. It is also a continuous tradition. It's very very diverse in itself. The different authors are very different from each other. They hate each other also. They quarrel between each other. But if you look at it from a distance, you see it's a continuous, ongoing debate. By it, I mean, again, Austrian literature, as it is, an ongoing, very fierce, fascinating debate on, again, what Europe is, what Austria is, what human being is, what history is, what historical catastrophe does to what we are.
We ask about a human being, yes, because we cannot forget about the psychoanalytical background in Austrian literature. And could you add something about this, specific and unique background created by you? Yes, of course, created by Freud and Wittgenstein, in the philosophical point of view. So could you tell something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two crucial points of reference, if extra literary points of reference in for Austrian literature. Probably there are more. Well, there are three, in fact, because one I have already mentioned, which is history and politics itself, right? Austrian literature, let me just redress it. Austrian literature is hardly ever uh, blind to the historical, political context that produced it. Even if it does not address it directly, it feels addressed. It feels itself as a response to this series of catastrophes of the historical violence. So that's the historical point of reference is one thing. Within the cultural sphere, the ongoing debate of literature, of Austrian literature, is not only responding to what happened within the tradition, but also responding to 2 points. One is the philosophical interest in language, which since Fritz Mautner and then Ludwig Wittgenstein, um, Hugo von Hofmannsthal in literary sphere as well, has been one of the key aspects and important qualities of Austrian reflection. The fascination, in other words, the fascination with language as the element of our thought, and the element in which we experience the world, but at the same time, the very element which contributes to silencing things that should not be silenced, and covering up certain gaps and rifts and breaks in our experience. Mm. So the critical attitude towards language, critical reflection upon the linguistic elements that surrounds us and fills us, the awkwardness, the unhomeliness that we feel within language, which is just a reflection of the unhomely nature of our surrounding in general. Uh, Famously, W.G. Sebald called Austria unheimliche Heimat, the unhomely home. And this unhomely home is that's unhomely home, unhomeliness of the home, so to speak, is studied by Austrian writers through the defamiliarization of language, the language which presents itself as familiar, which presents itself as homely, as ready at hand, is looked at with suspicion, with radical suspicion by various Austrian writers, and it is shown to be both the element of lie and the element, if we understand it as an element of lie, and an element of a very, very difficult, but still an element of communication, which would perhaps be more true than the everyday one. Um, So that's one very, very important line, which is also embodied at the very beginning of this tradition by Karl Kraus, the great anti-journalist and the editor-in-chief of Die Fackel, of the Torch, of this strange magazine, which was devoted mostly to the critical reflection upon the language of the press and the language of the everyday. And this is Kraus is together with Wittgenstein and Mautner are the towering figures that should not be forgotten as the points of reference for what happens later in the critical attitude to language and those attempts at defamiliarization, the study of language in Austrian literature. Now, the second uh, if the third, if we count also the political historical reference, the third point of reference is indeed psychoanalysis, which I think is very much present, if never in a simple way, never in a simple application, rather as a body of work and a body of tradition again, which is suspicious towards our being at home in ourselves, as a tradition which questions, famously question the fact that we are masters in our own home, right? Also for Austrian writers, this is simply not true, and Freud is at the beginning is one of the sources of this suspicion towards what happens in us, which we are not in control of, how we are defined by the sequence of catastrophes, of the traumatic catastrophes mm, that produces and that we build our funny temporary homes against. We pretend not to know, pretend not to be defined by those strange attacks or strange assaults of the traumatic catastrophes. But we are obviously constantly reminded of what happened by the strange and usually uncanny returns of what we were trying to repress or disavow or negate. Uh, in this sense, Austrian literature is indeed very true to its sources, although the techniques with which it responds to this, continues this tradition, are, again, let me stress it, very inventive, very diverse, and very, very complex. So it is not it's rarely pleasant literature, although the pleasure, the higher pleasure of confronting something, I would say, that aims for truth. That aims for existential, political, moral, psychological truth about us, about the country, about our continent. This pleasure cannot be compared. Speaking of my personal, again, emotions. This cannot be compared to anything else.
Yeah, and I assume that uh, this this presence of the psychoanalysis we can see exactly in a post-war period and in post-war Austrian literature. And can we talk a little bit more about examples? So maybe you have to- you know your favorite authors in Austrian literature, or your favorite books, or could you tell us something about your works with Austrian literature? You know, uh, how uh, your work as a research is connected of experience of reading it, and and you do you think that you are a part of this of this community, of this language community, or it's not your language?
Uh, okay, many questions at the same time, and let me address at
So
least some of them.
firstly,
Yeah.
examples, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Well, many of you, when you think of Austrian literature, many of you will think of Thomas Bernhard, and surely Thomas Bernhard is the person to look at if you're interested in post war Austrian literature. I admire him, and I'm not the only one to admire him. The second towering figure is Peter Handke, especially his early work, which is marked by this incredibly unpleasant but extremely incisive interest in the nature of the everyday life and the awkwardness of everyday life and the everyday language that we use. Bernhard, on the other hand, is an extremely deep explorer of the obsessions of human mind and obsessions that are expressed in language, but also being obsessed and haunted by the linguistic element. Zabot, whom I already referred to, claimed that it was Thomas Bernhard who actually rescued German language after its suicide, the collapse during the Nazi era, that the radical exploration of the linguistic element that happens in Thomas Bernhard renewed German language and made it usable, so to speak, for again. But it is to be reminded also or to be remembered that the post-Austrian literature is immensely rich with when it comes to to women writers. It is an astonishing richness, a really astonishing richness of writing women. Uh, the number of them is huge. Among those whom I love most are surely Ilse Eichinger, with her incredibly beautiful praise of what she calls bad or imperfect words, ironic apology of speaking in an imperfect way, which is a beautiful manifesto, which I'm very fond of. There's Ingeborg Bachmann, obviously, who is studying various modes of being a woman in the post-war time. There's surely the brilliant genius figure of Elfriede Jelinek, the Nobel Prize winner, uh, uh, who is one of the most radical writers that we have. Uh, i- incredibly extreme and incredibly uh, consistent, I would say, in her project. Uh, but it is also to be remembered that this tradition continues with people like Laura Freudenthaler, who is with us and who has published her new book last year. Uh, so uh, so this is an ongoing tradition. Uh, am
And we can
and
remember, we can forget about Clemens Setz, of course.
again, back to man. Back to men, my and our, if I can think of a community of readers, new love that is Clemens. That's the author of various novels such as Indigo, and books of volumes of short stories. Who is in a very specific, peculiar way consciously continuing the tradition of the critique of language, uh, and concentration or reflection upon what language does to us and how to be in the world that you don't fit in, uh, because that's perhaps again is another definition of Austrian literature, which is a study of misfitting, study of the misfit, and how you feel again not at home in your own home, how you don't fit, how you misfit, even if everything around you tells you that you should, and even sometimes you forget that you don't fit, and you think that you are well, okay, that's your everyday life, and you're there. But Austrian literature reminds you, in this sense, it's parallel to psychoanalysis, right? It uncovers those forgotten dimensions uh, that you dimensions of your existence, of our political, historical, but also personal existence, that we know they are there, but we don't want them to be there and keep on forgetting. In this sense, Austrian literature offers, I think, a counter community in a way, which is not a communitarian, cozy, homely community of those who fit, but precisely an open, critical, but quite, I would say, welcoming, strangely enough, community of the misfits, which is horizontally spreading as like a network, and it's welcoming in the sense that although it's rough, it's difficult to be there. You are surrounded within this anti or counter community. You're surrounded by those who don't fit, just like you don't fit, uh, and hence, do I feel a part of this community? I don't know. That would be a great thing if they let me in. But reading Austrian writers, writing about them, thinking together with them, is somehow a way to participate in this counter community, which, let me stress it again, I think is not uh, escapist, separate a planet. It is a critical dimension or an aspect of European community, an important stratum of European culture, which cuts across the continent and the continent's culture, and is an invaluable element of it. Obviously, the other important elements of a European community, understood as as a big community of communities. But I think that this counter community, this strange, critical community of the misfit that constantly reflect upon their own misfitting and the lies and repressive, disavowing moments of the linguistic elements that we all use, and that keep on reminding us that we are not what we should be if we don't, if we do not reflect upon the traumas of our history, upon the lies that we commit every day. That this community is an invaluable element, without which we go flat, without which we go um, simply stupid. Uh, so if you don't want to be, if you don't want to, if Europe doesn't want to be stupid, it needs to read Austrian literature.
Uh, okay, so what happened now with the category of next Beschmutter, the one who is the outsider and the one who is not to be the our guy, the our writer. You mentioned Bernhard Handke Jelinek, the unholy spirit here in Austria. So what is the tension between your idea of Austrian literature, the idea of outsiders, and the community of outsiders created by outsiders for outsiders, and this definition and this category of someone who split on the country, on the tradition and the memory?
Well, I mean, I'm not. Again, it's a complex thing because on the one hand, this is precisely the same in a sense that as you mentioned, especially Bernhard and Friedrich Jelinek come in here as enter here as those people who were uh, uh, and still are accused uh, of attacking their own supposedly homely home. But if I'm thinking now of the contemporary or new representatives of Austrian literary tradition that I'm interested in, such as Laura Freudenthaler that I mentioned and Clemens Zetz that you brought up, what I find very very interesting is, and perhaps it represents the also the general changes in humanity in the state we are in, that there is a lot of interest in private misfitting, in perhaps less a talk of specific specific political moments or historical moments that need to be discussed, but the general general feeling of not being exactly at home in the world. mm, which obviously has its political dimensions, which do not disappear. In Laura Freudenthaler's newest book, the question of the ecological catastrophe is very much present. And in Clemens, that's the feeling of the issue, the problem of our cruelty towards the non-human actors, especially animals, is constantly present. So they are very political, but I think there is also much interest in this newer Austrian literature, not in attacking Austria in itself, in its historical forgetfulness, but the very condition, human condition of misfitting, of being, of the awkwardness of being there today. I find it also extremely interesting that Clemens Zetz is very much interested in all forms of disabilities, in forms of mental, physical, not exactly again fitting into the world. He explores it uh, uh, with extreme empathy and sensitivity. Mm, and again, in this sense, he's opening this community, this counter community, to perhaps more universal matters than those that were of interest for earlier writers, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And but but also I think that that we have to remember about mm, this lack of memory and this lack of presence of Shoah and Holocaust and Nazi regime time uh, in the Austrian literature, exactly in the post-war literature, and mm because as you probably knew, you read last Frieda Jelinek book, uh, Angebete Person, and you know exactly that it's still a subject. It's we cannot forget about it, and started to talk about modern literature as something less complicated.
Yes, indeed. You're definitely right. Jelinek is still carrying the and the I would say the banner and the sword of criticism very powerfully. She holds the, if we were to continue this problematic military military metaphor. She's holding the weapons, the linguistic weapons of criticism, very strongly in her hand. And yes, I'm definitely with you on it. You know that. Uh, the I don't think that Clemens Zetz is not aware of the importance of this criticism, and I'm sure that it is fair to say that this is precisely what defines the position. Perhaps this is something that should be stressed: the position from which the Austrian writers look at the world, which is, on the one hand, a position of a deeply uncertain identity, deeply uncertain, unclear identity of a German speaking writer in a country which is not called Germany, which is the remnant of a huge empire, a multinational empire with a lot of Slavic and Jewish element, also in the writers themselves, obviously, right? Um, the joke has it that Austria is basically a Slavic country, but German speaking one, right? So obviously this is an exaggeration, right? But this uncertainty of identity, which is even strengthened later because of the Anschluss and the reemergence of Austrian Republic after the Second World War, is one of the defining moments. But the other defining moment is this pile of guilt, this pile of silence, which is in a strangely dialectical way connected to this uncertain identity, because you're not even sure if this is your own guilt. Obviously, it is, but you can pretend that it is not, right? Because that was not me, right? Because I wasn't myself when I was doing that. Mm, of course, this is an exaggeration, a caricature, but but yes, this is what it's constantly there. So the horror, I would say, and both the horror and the peculiarity, right? The specific nature of this position makes this is precisely what makes this literature so special.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Uh,
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I think the only thing to be added is to go and read, right? Uh,
yes, I think you can create a huge list with propositions and authors and books. So maybe you can create something like that for us, and we posted it on
no
our
problemo.
social media.
No problemo.
So the list of Austrian literature that you have read during your
Yeah,
lifetime.
the
Of it.
obligatory readings for the course. Honestly, the list is pretty long, but honestly, I really think again I'm addressing those who, when they hear Austria, they either fall asleep or run away with in terror. Uh, Honestly, I do sincerely believe that this body of work is part of the canon, counter canon, critical canon, explosive counter canon, but indeed the canon of European literature that every conscious, reflective European who cares about the future, the presence and the future shape of of European community should simply know and think about.
Yes, and that's why creates strong, also a strong European community,
Yeah, indeed.
I think.
Hmm.
So once again, our guest was Professor Adam Lipszyc from Institute of from Institute of Philosophy of Polish Academy of Science. Thank you so much, and I invite you another episode of our podcast.